Hiya! Welcome to this, my 69th episode of Video Fuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Hammond, sifting my basket of media memories, and in this installment, titled Belligerent Optimism, a 5th season episode of Grey's Anatomy becomes a touching off point to talk about overarching themes. I discover the golden thread version of a universal donor in the Studio 60 side of my collection, comments on Fargo and Archer, and 5 years later I'd marry him all over again. Happy anniversary, Ralph. Love this man. Welcome to the show.
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.
First, I want to celebrate we were able to get our backyard almost completely cleaned up. There have been some trees that were encroaching on our shed and piles of yard waste. I got a good deal from a local tree service. If you're in the area, I can say Green Planet Solutions does excellent work at affordable rates. Great job, guys. They were able to get after a lot of problem areas that had outgrown my meager abilities back there. And we got some new tires on the car, so we're ready for once the snow hits, and our roof is all sealed up now. So I'd say, yeah, for now the big stuff is out of the way. Another point of celebration is my classic collection, as in this episode I've catalogued 1,000 discs. While significant, it's a somewhat misleading milestone since, A, as I've mentioned, my classic collection comprises more than 2,500 discs altogether, so it's not even halfway, and 2, it's really not even close, because at some point I start recording 6 hours per disc, so each of those will take 3 times as long to catalog. Since they're all more or less still 2 hours per disc, I didn't start doing that as early as I thought I did, but on the plus side, the quality is still 3 times as good. I do run into a 20th season episode of The Simpsons from January of 2009 in the set with the fan-driven Simpsons wiki says was the last to be animated in 4:3 aspect and the standard definitions, so that's still something I'm going to run into occasionally. But it's a milestone all the same, and one that sparked a memory. I took a photo of this disc when I finished burning it back in April 2009, and recently posted as a Throwback Thursday on Video Fuzzy's Facebook page. Check it out. Correction. Error. First off, it's not a correction, just new information. I mentioned last time No Time to Die is being put off till November. I'm now hearing it'll release sometime next year. It's going to be fantastic whenever it's released. I'm just looking forward to it. I'll watch the thing in a biohazard suit if I have to. And this one's more of a mea culpa than an actual correction, but here goes. Watching this set, I encountered an episode of Nip Tuck on disc 987 where a ridiculous lily-white woman, Candy Richards, oh no, some white person gave me that name. She took a DNA test that suggested that she had some African ancestry, which she, now Coco, parlayed into a hip-hop single called Yo Stink, number 8 on YouTube and climbing. She wanted the doctors to give her more African features, like, she wanted a great big round badonk, and the rest she did in hair and makeup. But the thing I needed to point out is several times over the course of this podcast, sometimes simultaneously with commentary, I have employed Coco levels of cultural appropriations, general accents. I am not a formal student of accents. I've committed theater in the past, crafted characters. I've inhabited and drawn what cultural wealth I might in their portrayal. But no, as I've sought to liven this production with characters, I have employed ageist stereotypes, gender norms, stereotypes. Talking about telenovelas last time, I probably could have been a little more considerate. I don't mean to dismiss or offend. I recently ran into a suggestion that using graphic interface clips in social media featuring actors of different cultural backgrounds than one's own is akin to using blackface, so the podcast equivalent is likely to involve that sort of accent work. Either way, it's my stuff, and I need to own it. So if I do a thing at any point that crosses a line, comic or otherwise, call me out. I want to not be ridiculous, insensitive. That telenovela bit, even in recording it, I went back and forth as to whether to use it. Another example, it's not okay just because Eric McCormick channeled Desi Arnaz in the Lucy episode of Will and Grace, but calling him out while elsewhere enjoying a Lucy reference with my husband, that's just two examples of white dudes doing cringy things. It doesn't really excuse either. So yeah, what's done is done. I just wanted to say out loud somewhere, right here in fact, that this is a thing I'm thinking about while putting this together. And if I go into character at any point and hit your ear wrong, like, hey, what the hell was that? What are you saying with that? Contact me. I want to do better. When we know better, we do better. If I quote Mrs. Obama quoting Dr. Maya Angelou, who, yes, I'm aware I have also approximated David Allen Greer's impression of her in this work as well. My goal is to send you to comedy.com and enjoy the original source material, and also read Mrs. Obama's autobiography, Becoming. It's very insightful, and just like I said, I want to do better.
Call this game to order.
Calling up a little old business.
Yeah, I mentioned my fresh appreciation for Sarah Silverman last time for her work in pop star Never Stop, Never Stopping. My apologies, actually, she's crap. No, just kidding. I just needed to also mention I enjoyed her in the Wreck-It Ralph productions as well, and as Ollie on Bob's Burgers. More on that series started its 11th season recently. It got off to kind of a weird start, but she recently took part in a naked celebrity get out the vote promo online that was eye-catching, to say the least. And no, that's pretty much it. But I see where she's about to be 50, so on behalf of viewers everywhere, happy 50th in December, Sarah, and all the absolute best. And yeah, she was funny and crank yankers sometimes too, as you were.
Friday Night Feature.
Anywho, my video fuzzies, almost immediately as I started cataloging this set, I ran into an episode of Grey's Anatomy on disc 976, opening with a voiceover by Jeffrey Dean Morgan as the still dead Denny Duquette, and auditory and sensory hallucination tormented Katherine Heigl as Izzy Stevens in Season 5, Episode 13, Stairway to Heaven. The episode was the third in the story arc, featuring emotional estrangement between Sandra Oh and Ellen Pompeo as best friends Christina Yang and Meredith Grey, Izzy's decision to pursue her relationship with Justin Chambers as Alex Karev, despite the constant presence of her late enamorado, and the primary emotional touchstone of the arc, Eric Stoltz as William Dunn, a serial killer on death row, is admitted with a brain injury, which has apparently awakened some sense of contrition in him for having murdered 5 women. Patrick Dempsey plays neurosurgeon Derek Shepard, who is unconvinced that the brain bleed has made him a good person. Dark and twisty Meredith has been bonding with William in his limbo between wanting life-saving surgery, which would send him right back to prison and death row, to answer for his crimes with his life, or to bleed out in the hospital, a reformed penitent who'd made peace with his mortality and is ready to donate his organs to Jackson, a 12-year-old in need of a liver donation. That's a lot. Plenty to start with. I threw in disc 953 to get a better sense of the story arc with a peek at episode 11, Wish You Were Here. Meredith's fight with Christina has already started at that point, no hints there. The prisoner, William Dunn, has arrived in the ambulance bay. Oh, I just noticed the character off death row is named Dunn. Nice. And Christina and Meredith learn he is PDR. What's PDR? Christina asks, to which James Pickens Jr. as Chief Weber responds, prisoner, death row. Izzy was determined to let Karev know that she was hallucinating her dead lover. Chandra Wilson as Dr. Miranda Bailey was joyously welcoming a returning patient, Aaron Refram, as the soon-to-be heartbreaking pediatric liver recipient, the very picture of health as we meet him here, when suddenly his primary doctor, Dr. Kenley, keels over dead. His care is taken over by a brash new pediatric surgeon, Jesse Capshaw as Arizona Robbins, who tells Dr. Bailey the late lamented Kenley's course of treatment on Jackson, Miranda corrects her, whatever, is quaint, but she's looking to transition him to something that might, work. Miranda seethes that she'd supported Kenley's treatment, but Robbins has already scooted off in her whimsical roller skate shoes and lilac stethoscope. Returning from that background back to the Stairway to Heaven episode, we find Karev is giving Izzy the space that she needs to figure out some stuff about her hallucinations, which are affecting her work. It seems Denny in her head, who loves her so much, will not shut up long enough to let her doctor. I believe in heaven. I believe in hell. The show starts with Denny in voiceover. I've never seen either, but I believe they exist. They have to exist, because without a heaven, without a hell, we're all just headed for nothing. Fifth season of Grey's Anatomy, Stairway to Heaven, had a lot of tricky themes, central to which Meredith Grey's patient, William, a death row inmate with brain hemorrhage who is a match for a young boy in desperate need of a liver transplant. The inmate has ostensibly made his peace with this world. He is exacerbating his injury, banging his head against his bed frame, bleeding through his bandages. Meredith is ignoring him through all this, working to keep him sedated and comfortable, willing him to bleed out, as convinced as he is that he wishes to end it all ahead of his execution. Miranda at first ignores all the moral dilemmas presented in this situation. Her patient is dying. Her patient can be treated and saved. She orders Meredith to keep her patient alive, to page Dr. Shepard. Meredith says he doesn't want that. Challenged, William speaks up and affirms that is his wish. Miranda hears him say he doesn't want treatment. This death row inmate articulates his awareness that his organs are a match for Miranda's patient, Jackson, and that he wants to save him. This makes Miranda, Dr. Bailey, deeply conflicted. So conflicted you can hear it as she orders Meredith to page Dr. Shepard. Part of her hopes Meredith will ignore her order, but at the same time, she says, we're doctors, not executioners. She returns to her young patient's bedside only to watch as Jackson's condition worsens and his mother become this swinging mace of emotional distress. In just a few days from the background episode I watched this one, we went from where the residents were teasing the kid about his trying to get on the Make-A-Wish list because that's just for kids who are dying, to where they're pulling other patients off life-saving equipment elsewhere in the hospital because Jackson has less than 16 hours to live. Meredith has been sitting with PDR William as his condition deteriorates, urging him to go to the light. He remembers how, when his grandfather was dying, that he said he smelled lemons. As his brain bleed continues, however, William expresses doubts about wanting to die, getting agitated when Christina comes in, and she pages Dr. Shepard. Dr. Shepard, furious, demands to know why he wasn't informed sooner. He orders Meredith to be on the surgical team so she can watch what he has to do in order to save him. Elsewhere, the teams are looking for options for Jackson. Eunice is on the case, but Miranda is. Well, she cannot watch this beautiful boy die. She starts actively weighing William's recovery and release back to death row and his subsequent scheduled demise. His dying on the operating table and his liver available for transplant. She stumbles down the corridor in a fit of conflicted conscience, steps into the OR and addresses Derek, begging him not to finish William's surgery. He tells her this would kill him just as surely as he were to stab him, and she knows this. He sets his scalpel aside, ordering her to take ownership of this choice. She ultimately relents, knowing that the surgery will save the death row inmate and condemn her patient. Elsewhere, Dr. Weber has been looking for suitable donors. There was another patient admitted to Seattle Grace with a head injury from an auto accident who was also a match for the young patient. This patient's wife did not want to face the question of her husband dying and donating his organs. Dr. Weber steps back, honoring her wishes, but then intervenes again on Jackson's behalf, and the wife changes her mind. He gets the liver to Dr. Bailey, and she is able to save the boy. Later, confessing to each other what they had done and acknowledging their roles and how they'd twisted their oaths, Miranda tells Weber that she'd crossed a line. He says he did too. She cannot be consoled. As for William, well, he's a serial killer. He's murdered 5 women. He's one emotionally manipulative bugger. He didn't care about saving a 12-year-old kid. This was all he had left, to convince Meredith to act against all her training, to make indefensible choices in the name of following her patient's wishes, and as part of his final moments on Earth, get her fired. That was the little endorphin rush he was going for. Psycho. Meanwhile, Izzy Stevens is dealing with hallucinations of Denny, who knows he doesn't want to be there anymore. You remember Denny from episode 57, cutting that LVAD wire. Denny was all, come on, why am I still here? Let me go. Let me go. Heaven or hell or Asia. I just can't be trapped here watching you in a relationship with Karev. Izzy sought to logic it out. Think like a scientist, Denny said, and she responded, I am. Scientists believe what they can see, what they can feel. She says she can smell him, smell his skin. How could I do that if you weren't alive and here? She slaps him and feels his face. Her hand made a sound. Tell me what's happening. Jackson's mother is also frantic that her son lived, that she be there for him. Izzy assures her that she is, even out of the room, that she's there for him, that she is. Izzy suddenly flashes on what Denny's been trying to tell her, that he is there for her. Her mind is holding on to his semi-physical presence because she thinks she needs him there, but Denny is already there for her in all things and in all ways because of the love that they'd shared and what life and what time they'd shared. She also realizes what her brain has been manifesting this whole time is that she is that close to the end. She is sick, her body knows it, and a big part of her wants to reunite with Denny. And this suddenly cognizant part of her is disgusted by this instinct and orders him begone, banished, that she will always choose life over whatever trap Denny represents. Rewatching this episode for the third time, this was the line that stood out to me. Izzy confronts the hallucination, the Denny Duquette hallucination she's been experiencing pretty much since he died. I'm sick. I'm sick, aren't I? And instead of telling me to save my life, you son of a bitch, you selfish son of a bitch, I hate you. I hate you. I didn't know. Miracles happen. Medical miracles happen every day. You said it. Leave. Just leave, she said. I can go now because you know. If I go, I don't know if I can come back. In the choice between heaven and hell, I choose living. I choose life. Get out of here. Go, get out of here. What are you waiting for? To which he says, this, and kisses her deeply, warmly, passionately. Emotionally, character-wise, yeah, I'd say this made for a satisfying conclusion for the Desi arc, but something about it was really pinging my ear. Someone's suffering from a deadly disease that selfish people withhold life-saving information for way too long while they just get sicker and sicker, and then the outrage upon that realization, it was a layer of this production that zipped by me the first couple times I watched, but yeah, gotta say, I can understand Izzy's reaction somehow. As for Williams saying he was just playing Meredith and trying to wreck her career for the lulz, Meredith confronts him in a way probably none of his victims ever had a chance to. In the face of his psychological assault, she calmly assures him that he's nothing more than any other patient who's facing death. That death is scary, and what he'd always craved was control, so he can rewrite history all he wants, but they provided this death row inmate with what care they could and remanded him to the state's custody. He did manage to get to her all the same, however. He invited her to witness his execution, and that broke her. She wanted to be there to show him compassion, and it was horrible, she said, so much so that she could not stop crying. Derek had to take her to Christina, who sat with her afterwards. As it happens, Christina had some stuff that she needed to talk with Meredith about as well. They reconnect during Denny's closing voiceover. Heaven, hell, limbo. No one really knows where we're going or what's waiting for us when we get there. But the one thing we can say for sure, with absolute certainty, is that there are moments that take us to another place. Moments of heaven on earth. And maybe, for now, that's all we need to know. That was an incredible episode of a show that wings all over the place sometimes. I didn't even mention I guess I'd hesitate to call it the D story, where Meredith's half-sister Lexi in the on-call room managed to give Dr. Sloan a very male injury. One imagines, since one must, all events occurring out of shot, that they'd engaged in some rodeo exhibition-style gymnastiness and broke the dismount. Dr. Torres was called in to assess, and she called in Dr. Hunt's vascular expertise. And by the end, Lexi had forged new alliances, awareness, and coping mechanisms. But as indicated, these interludes were comic relief for the main stories at best. And that's sort of true with Izzy's storyline, which is about to take a sharp turn. Izzy's basically got one more season left in this series, and she spends a good portion of it as a cancer patient. And that's another reason why this episode stood out for me. Cross Connection. The title I chose for this episode, Belligerent Optimism, comes from an interview given by late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, where she described herself as a belligerent optimist, in that her life experiences had taken her through some dark times, World War II and the Shoah, to the Red Scare in the 1950s, Senator McCarthy in the House Un-American Activities Committee, to the kinds of things that she saw going on today. In that interview given at the Kennedy Center in New York, she cited Dr. King's observation that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Her focus was on equal rights for women, which makes perfect sense. The class she graduated from had 9 women in a class of 500. Equal rights were not a thing at this time. Employers would right out loud say that they wanted no lady lawyers in their shop. The parallel that she drew was of a musical instructor who would audition students, claiming instantly to know whether it was a male or female performer at the keyboard. When put to the test, closed-curtain auditions, that instructor got it wrong most of the time. So gender is no determining factor when it comes to talent, native ability, and aptitude. The work is hard, but those up to the challenge deserve a shot, and at the age of 60, she was appointed to the top court in the land, and among many others, helped extend same-sex marriage rights to me and my husband, and to more than 1 million people across the U.S. Her death from cancer was announced just as I was finishing my work on episode 68, a pretty good year, and felt like a further blow to that blithe appellation. As I put this episode together, I was struck by the sheer number of storylines, characters, and actors dealing with cancer, which incidentally was highlighted during the DNC conference as a top priority for candidate Joe Biden. The Cancer Moonshot presentation, now part of my current collection on disc X343, should I want to pull it up again. I opened this episode with a reference to the Nip Tuck Roxy St. James episode, in which Dr. Troy, recovering from male breast cancer, attends, quite mercenarily, a breast cancer survivors support group so as to drum up some reconstruction business. There he met Roxy St. James, a beautiful woman in deathly fear of her own breasts. Given her family history, her mother's early death, she's frightened of starting a family and then leaving them motherless. She asked Dr. Troy to remove her breasts and give her implants. There was some hesitation on his part, so she sauntered into the waiting room at Troy McNamara with an electric carving knife and started the surgery for them. Oh, Nip Tuck, you blushing violet. I also encountered a few episodes from the 4th season Battlestar Galactica in this set, and on disc 978, episode titled A Disquiet Follows My Soul, there's an exchange that stands out where Admiral Adama, played by Edward James Olmos, confronts Mary McDonnell as President Laura Roslin jogging through the corridors. She's off her meds after battling cancer like a warrior for so long. He tells her to take her meds and follow her doctor's orders. She says, "Take your hands off me, Bill. I've played my role in this farce. A dying leader will guide the people to the blah, 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 frackin' blah, blah. I've been there. I've done that. Now what? Is there another role I have to play for the rest of my life?" Remember what we said on New Caprica? We talked about trying to live for today. Well, I'd better think about that, because maybe tomorrow really isn't coming. Maybe today is all we have left. And maybe, just maybe, I've earned the right to live a little before I die. And guess what? So have you. Now get out of my way. Then later, they do. Episode ends with Bill and Laura cuddling naked in Bill's bunk, and with Laura smiling in a most life-affirmed way. Well done. Tracing the theme further on disc 983, I find Jon Stewart's interview with Gwen Ifill on The Daily Show, January 27th, 2009. Per her Wikipedia entry, Ifill succumbed to breast and endometrial cancer November 14th, 2016 at the age of 61. And actually, while I was putting this section together, the world learned of the passing of guitar maestro Eddie Van Halen at the age of 65 from throat cancer. One of the movies Ralph and I watched in theaters back in 2014 was The Fault in Our Stars, where the plot centered on a pair of young people who met in a cancer survivor support group. I pulled up my copy so I could quote this line correctly. Hazel informs us, Augustus Waters ended up dying 8 days later in the ICU when the cancer, which was made of him, stopped his heart, which was also made of him. Cancer-anchored storylines throughout Grey's Anatomy and A Million Little Things. I referenced Terminal City in episodes 23 and 39, solid production by the CBC. Battlestar Galactica. Hell, I only learned while clicking around IMDb about Richard Hatch. No, not the naked guy on Survivor. The Richard Hatch who played Zarek in Battlestar Galactica. He died in 2017. I either missed that at the time or spaced it. Pancreatic cancer. Damn. It was good to see him in this set. Hatch had played Apollo in the original series, and his appearance as Vice President Zarek in the reboot was a lovely callback. He was far too young. Frack cancer. Frack it right in the ear. I have other cross-connections to trace, but this theme stood out for its primacy. Cancer is an affliction that has touched, darkened, textured, and it's destroyed the lives of millions of people and families around the world throughout history. The World Health Organization attributes 1 in 6 deaths worldwide to cancer as of 2018. And while we've welcomed advances in treatment and survival rates climb, the stark reality of our brief moment on this stage is never far from us. So with nothing more than what wisdom might be contained in the advice from a 6 Feet Under episode title, eat the peach. Enjoy it. Let it drip down your chin and sun rays burst on your tongue and gurgle down your throat. I'll have occasion to return to this theme in a moment, but as advice goes, eat the peach, reach out, make the call, do the thing, enjoy this life. You really only get the one. In other, more standard connections for this project, my Studio 6 Feet Under challenge, Grey's Anatomy has connections all over my collection, so for this set, it makes sense to trace from the serial killer, William Dunn, played by Eric Stoltz, and maximum effort, I found a fairly tight connection for him appearing in an episode of Medium with Miguel Sandoval, who appeared in The West Wing with absolutely everyone, including Bradley Whitford in Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. In other connections, in the Nip Tuck episode I've referenced a few times now, Roxy St. James was played by Dina Meyer, who, holy cross connections, Batman, played all-growed-up Barbara Gordon, Oracle, in Birds of Prey, which is definitely in here somewhere, so very much looking forward to seeing her again. Babs was a paraplegic in that series, used a custom-made chair that looked something like a motorized office chair so that she could sit all sexy-like. What I saw in this 2009 episode of Nip Tuck, she had lost none of that. In an episode of Monk, Gina Rollins plays the lady next door in a caper Detective Adrian Monk becomes aware of while investigating a heist at a museum of oddities, the theft of one egg-eating robot. They bond over a lost spouse, but Monk grows suspicious of her proximity to a suspect in a related case and accuses her of being part of it. I ran into Ms. Rowlands in my recording of The Notebook. Thought she did such a good job there. Even more fun, Mark Van was a huge get. Van played the museum curator who asked investigators if they could leave the body of his security guard impaled on a mounted swordfish. I rattled off a short list of Mark Van's many appearances throughout my collection back in episode 61, and once again I mistook him for Matt Freuer. It's not that hard a mistake to make. Both Matt and Mark played doctors. Mark with David Boreanaz and Angel, Matt in a 90s sitcom called Dr. Doctor, and a whole bunch of other appearances. But the one I wanted to highlight here was he appeared as Pestilence in Supernatural, a new episode of which appeared in my DVR listing from this week. We haven't had a new episode of Supernatural since March, and it looks like season 15 is resumed with the remainder of its run through its series finale in November. I imagine we'll see how that goes presently, but I'm absolutely excited to check in. I mentioned David Boreanaz. I encountered a reasonably fun, if ridiculous, episode of Bones that found the team infiltrating a traveling circus to investigate the death and disappearance of a set of conjoined twins. Boreanaz as FBI Special Agent Seeley Booth posed as a Russian knife thrower, complete with clearly born-with-it accent, and Emily Deschanel as Temperance Bones Brennan played his wife and became obsessed with Booth throwing his knives at her with increasing degrees of difficulty. Oh, sure, he could do it, but you need your body to remain intact and with no knife injuries to your head, hands, and heart do your work, right? So, no, what adrenaline tiger are you chasing here? They solved the case, but what made me stop and watch it for more than I otherwise might have was the appearance of Andy Richter as Ringmaster. Fun. Since David's brought us into the Buffyverse, on disc 984 I found an episode of Leverage featuring Danny Strong. He's always entertaining. He most prominently played Third Banana in the Trio, later seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Here he brought some of that energy to a turn as a bean counter brother in a corrupt family business. Brilliant. In other cross-connections, I found Maggie Siff, more usually Jax Teller's girlfriend in Sons of Anarchy, showed up in an episode of ABC's Life on Mars. I found an NBC miniseries from 2009 called The Last Templar, which concerned a gospel said to have been written by Christ himself, which starred Mira Sorvino and Omar Sharif. I was waiting for confirmation, but I believe I found an appearance by Yvette Nicole Brown of Community and the Mayor in a Hamburger Helper commercial that aired during an episode of Monk that I had recorded on disc 988. I saw where Tom Irwin made an appearance in the 7th season of 24. Tom played Angela's dad in My So-Called Life, which I identified with way too much and enjoyed quite a lot. Irwin also appeared in an episode of Lost that I encountered on disc 998, so that was neat. Over on the closer, I found Bob Clennon, that's Tom from Cougar Town, playing an assistant coroner, and on a second season episode of Burn Notice, I encountered Tom Gretsch from the 4400, as well as Silas Weir Mitchell from Prison Break. Finally, I debated whether to run this here or in my actual classic collection discussion, but I encountered the pilot episode for Trust Me, another office dramedy exploring inner workings of an ad agency. The show itself is not all that interesting to me at the moment, which swayed my decision where to talk about it, but my God, there are a ton of names involved with this production. Along with show leads Eric McCormick and Tom Cavanaugh, who is better in this than what I saw in bizarrely titled Love Monkey, we had Tim Russ, Jason O'Mara, Adam Scott, and Monica Potter, who worked with Robin Williams in Patch Adams, so direct tie to David E. Kelly's The Crazy Ones, and then Griffin Dunn, who led opposite Madonna as Loudon Trott in Who's That Girl, and aw, hell, Rhea frickin' Seahorn is in this show. Which reminds me, I so hope AMC will re-air some of the Better Call Saul seasons before I was able to archive them. Seriously, connections all over the damn where from this production.
Golden thread.
I'm not convinced about this move, but dang it, just about every time I discover a golden thread in this production, it's a white male. Scrolling back through when I started doing these, I'm counting about a dozen in the past year or so, and with maybe a couple of exceptions. Francis Fisher and Dana Delaney traced appearances by Patrick Fischler, Mark A. Shepard, Rene Aubergenois, Charles Shaughnessy, Alan Tudyk, Adam Arkin, Dean Norris, Bo Bridges, Michael O'Neill, and Mark Vann. So, in cataloging my 1000th disc, I wanted to be a little proactive with this, and in doing so, expand this little celebration of talented cross-connections through my collection. Actor Chase Kim appears on disc 1000 in my recording of Leverage, which unlocks another solid connection for that show to his debut appearance on television as a Korean handler in the 5th season West Wing episode of Han, which also turned up recently in my cataloging efforts. Along with that direct zero-step link to Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, IMDb reports Kim is all over my collection, including appearances in Star Trek Enterprise, Commander-in-Chief. He was in Desperate Housewives, Moonlight, Comedy Central's Chocolate News. He was in Brothers and Sisters. I mentioned Leverage. He was also in Monk, 24, Lie to Me, Dollhouse, Life, Hawthorne. He was in Southland, Bones, The Event, Private Practice, Grey's Anatomy, Castle, Go On, Body of Proof, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Rizzoli and Isles, and Criminal Minds. Those last few episodes almost certainly not in my collection, but I'd for sure watch some of them while they were on. Kim is in a lot of shows once, and the ones I'm tracing in my collection, he's not doing all that much, but he projects a clear voice that tells the part of the story that he's given to tell, and I'd say presents workmanlike support in the roles that he takes on. His appearance on Disc 1000, the Leverage episode, most of what he's doing is getting in and out of cars and pointing a handgun with a quiet air of professionalism. A man with a job to do, and he does it well. All the best in your future efforts, Chase Kim, and for the sometimes thankless roles you've taken on. Thank you.
Diving into my classic collection.
In my VHS to DVD collection, I encountered a strange episode of Fringe, even for Fringe. On disc 976, I've got Bound, a first season episode that finds Anna Torv as Olivia Dunham abducted and taken to a spooky lab of some sort, strapped into a bed, flipped face down, and, well, it's still the first season, but already the back of her neck has been pierced so many procedures, she may as well just install a port back there. She can't identify her abductors, but when they flip her face down, she sees the shoes one of them is wearing. They leave her bound in place, but this is Special Agent Olivia Dunham. She is outrageously resourceful, and what she does is she grabs a bunch of lab samples that she sees on a desk, grabs a ring of keys, which once she escapes, she finds a vehicle that they open, and she flees, not before burying the lab samples, because, like I said, she's quite resourceful. Reunited with her team, she takes them to where she was, and naturally the spooky lab has been gutted and her story dismissed. Disgraced, she is knocked out and taken into custody by an agent that she has some bad history with, accusations of sexual harassment swept under a rug. She wakes up to find that he's handcuffed her to a hospital bed, letting her know that he'll be shutting down the Fringe division. Which seems precipitous, since the samples that Agent Dunham found at the spooky Brigadoon lab is similar to creatures blowing up in people's stomachs, turning into super-fast killer slugs, and in the course of her investigation she runs into some familiar shoes belonging to Mitchell, a double agent working at the complex. Olivia tracks Mitchell's wife, Samantha, to her home, shoots her in self-defense, then confronts her abductor. This was a complicated episode with a lot going on, so much so that the creature of the week was a little overshadowed by the very busy day that Olivia was having. The cold open where Olivia is abducted by shadow agents in a vanishing lab actually reminded me quite a lot of the Avengers, though, which I wanted to take exactly this amount of time to celebrate the memory of Diana Rigg, who last month, it's definitely a theme, also lost her battle with cancer. Now on Video Fuzzy, a fond reflection. Dame Diana Rigg, Mrs. Emma Peel, for so many action-packed seasons partnered to John Steed. She was often in distress, but her skills and training made it possible for her to get out of it herself, often as not, and to rescue Steed a few times as well. I don't have any episodes of the Avengers to talk about here yet, but I am looking forward to encountering them. A movie channel I got when I was in Devil's Lake, I think I aired old episodes of that series, and I recorded several. Many of these Honor Blackman-era episodes were quite low energy, but once Rigg arrived, they took full advantage of her verve, spirit, and attitude, not to mention pronounced physicality and undeniable sexuality in a way that only the BBC, with fresh access to color broadcasting in the late 19-swinging 60s, could. Mrs. Emma Peel was by turns playful, resourceful, smoldering, depending on the situation she encountered. The episodes through this era highlighted the kinds of psyops that were proving something of fascination with such productions of The Prisoner, The Saint, Department S, and others. Trippy camera angles, music cues, and surreal sets played on the idea of dreamscape and madness, and along with ne'er-do-wells, Mrs. Peel found herself battling confusion of her own senses often enough. The Avengers joined several duos over the course of the series, but I feel like the John Steed and Emma Peel pairing had the best chemistry. It's the one I remember most fondly. The 1998 movie release teaming Ralph Fiennes and Uma Thurman against Sean Connery drew from the Mrs. Peel era of storytelling and drew in a lot of that energy. She did so much more than squeeze into tight turtlenecks and ward off would-be no-goodniks from the shores of England's sceptred isle, but it felt like handing off from that episode of Fringe gave me a great opportunity to celebrate some of her best. I ran into a fun tribute video some clever person put together, and I'll include a link in the comments of Video Fuzzy's Facebook entry for this episode, as well as my show notes. Most of my memories of her are from the Avengers and her hosting Mystery on PBS, and they are all quite fond. Other productions I found, I've got MSNBC's coverage of Barack Obama's inauguration recorded over the course of 4 DVDs. That's excessive. It's like I've got an Obama inaugural disc set, which was a fairly historical event. I obviously did not watch the full 8 hours I've apparently got of this coverage, but when I catalog stuff like this, I tend to fast forward in scan mode so I don't miss, say the recording switched over at some point at 3 minutes of a TBS production of Clue. I'd want to mark where that happened. It didn't at any point, but I did note the timestamp where Barack Obama took the oath of office. There was some awkwardness with Chief Justice Roberts misspeaking, which caused Obama to misspeak, and then Gretchen on Fox and Friends thought maybe that meant that actually McCain was president. Then, as I fast-forwarded through the post-inaugural festivities, I saw footage lingering for quite a long time on this really awkward moment at a luncheon where the Obamas and the Bidens were standing near 2 crystal bowls I think were being presented to them, and I was like, they're not going to need to carry those around with them for the rest of the day, right? But it was a full day, full of pageantry and parades and cheering and speeches and celebrations, and it was nice to have a good chunk of it recorded. That was 2009. I see where my second disc in my current collection, Disc X002, features President Trump taking the oath of office on January 20th, 2017, along with his inaugural address, and that is all I felt like I needed to archive of that. I see where I took a lot of notes as I was cataloging my 4th and 5th season episodes of The West Wing, but my most solid takeaway from that set was the 4th season finale, which was called simply 25. What's going on here is following her commencement ceremony, Zoe Bartlett goes out celebrating with friends, and in a disastrous turn of events, is kidnapped. Her Secret Service handler found dead in an alleyway. John Spencer, as Chief of Staff Leo McGeary, has brought the news to Martin Sheen as President Jed Bartlett, assuring him that he has the full support of the White House staff and the Joint Chiefs at this terrible moment, and they'd shepherd him through this crisis. Jet points out that a few years back he'd laid out a hypothetical situation, this exact scenario in which Zoe was kidnapped by foreign nationals determined to steer U.S. nuclear weapons into Israel, and shown a photo and proof of life, and given such a demand he would do it, because at that moment he is not the President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief. He is a father desperate to save his daughter, and would literally do anything in his power to do so. Leo, the people you just mentioned don't have the legal authority to stop me from doing certain things, and some of them would go to jail if they didn't follow my orders. Very quietly, he said, I want you to assemble the cabinet I want you to call the Speaker of the House. Jed was invoking the 25th Amendment. I applauded. It was incredible watching Martin Sheen create a character facing the situation. At this moment in the show, Vice President Hoynes has resigned quietly to avoid an influence-peddling scandal. The House is under Republican rule, and the Speaker is John Goodman as Republican Glen Allen Walken. In doing this thing, Jed would be powerless to do the one thing that he desperately wanted to do. Anything at all, meet any demand that was made of him that would save his daughter. It was the most honorable and selfless act, and both he and John Spencer gave the scene exactly the gravitas it required. Section 3 of the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution allows the President to transfer temporarily the power of the presidency to the next in line of succession, and it mirrors how completely upside down the President's life has been turned, his political rival at the Resolute desk supplanting him. Someone somewhere has his daughter, and he simply cannot. That, and Walken is an honorable man. And despite a lot of the new Republican-type people in the West Wing, he is coming across as presidential and not a craven power grab. But wow, did the chickens come home to roost in this episode. The covert ops assassination of the Kumari Defense Minister Sharif that I mentioned last time hits the news, and suddenly that's pretty much what now acting President Walken is dealing with. But he handles it pretty well until U.S. military personnel, sailors on shore leave, are blown up in a terrorist attack in Islamabad, and Walken orders bombers to Kamar in retribution. Leo briefs Jed, who is insulated from the actual decision-making on this matter, while the search for Zoe continues. Discussing the escalation, Bartlett intones, "The ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral. Returning violence with violence only multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars." Dr. King, Leo supplies by way of attribution. "I'm part of that darkness now, Leo," Jed broods. "When did that happen?" Leo exonerates him with the words, "Dr. King wasn't wrong. He just didn't have your job." Once Zoe was recovered and safe, and Bartlett resumed his post, Walken stepped down. No worries about an interregnal coup or an acting president seizing power, just grown-ups who understood each other, grown-ups who understood the stakes, the reality, the impossible humanity of the situation. Ahead of all this, there was barely a whiff of a scandal. No one would ever have been able to put it together. Just Matthew Perry as this sees in 5 dimensions White House counsel. Because Hoynes had disclosed information that he should not have to impress a woman that he was proposing to, he submitted his resignation. It's... damn, I appreciate Sorkin's optimism in all this. Closing out this segment, I wanted to mention the following episode, Han. That episode focused on a North Korean pianist seeking asylum, and was, in fact, the television debut for my Golden Thread highlight for this episode, Chase Kim. Hey, Chase. Moving to Battlestar Galactica, in my copy of The Oath on Disc 987, Gaeta takes command of Galactica. President Rosalind piggybacks on Gaius' regular podcast to address the fleet, stabilizing the mutiny as Admiral Adama orchestrates her escape, but not before a very passionate, very public kiss that lets everyone know the current lay of the land. No, phrasing, just, this followed that very beautiful scene with them in bed together, and I'll be in my bunk. On discs 989 and 990, I found the Fox Movie Channel presentation of Al Pacino's Looking for Richard from 1996, a detailed exploration of King Richard III, examining character and plot development in the show with cutaways to Shakespeare's historical home, scenes and direction on stage intercut with the actors being shooed away from an outdoor cafe for filming without a license. I think Pacino gets to play the title character and tell his story while talking about the story and about the acting itself. Far from the usual dour Shakespearean history, Al Pacino and his troupe of actors talk about the show, the story, creating their characters. They discuss the interactions, the drama, the plots and reveals, and they laugh in the joy of discovery that happens with creative types being creative. Blink and you'll miss it, but for more, I touched on my reactions to our capital Shakespeare production of King Richard III back in episode 30 from July of 2018. It's just past the 37-minute mark if you go searching. They boiled it down to 2.5 hours, while Pacino's version came in at under 2, but be fair, this movie was his search for Richard, highlights with commentary rather than the production itself. What else? Oh, discs 985 and 986, the Turner Classic Movies presentation of Woody Allen's Annie Hall. Oh, I love Annie Hall. Woody Allen just faces the camera and a melange of nutty images play for 2 hours, piquant themes, a 6-year-old Alfie in therapy discussing his concerns that the universe is expanding, everything will break apart. His mom is all, "How is that your business? You're in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is not expanding." Fun. I loved his Marshall McLuhan reference, and oh, wow, talk about connections. Along with Diane Keaton, obviously, we had Carol Kane, Shelley Duvall, Jeff Goldblum, Paul Simon, Beverly D'Angelo, Christopher Walken was in this thing. I was seven when this movie was made. I couldn't rewatch the whole thing for this, but I got as far as to where he and Annie meet, and he's appalled at her driving. But I did catch his joke at the snooty publisher's party. Oh, I'd heard that commentary and dissent had merged and formed dysentery. Fun movie. No, it's fine. We can walk to the curb from here. I clicked ahead through the movie. After she moves to L.A., he proposes marriage, and oh, damn, I just had an image of Neil Simon writing this movie. There's a lot of themes they share. It's kind of like watching Woody Allen writing his version of a Neil Simon show. Wild. My biggest takeaway from the film is the philosophical treatise he poses as the cold open. Woody Allen faces the camera in his earnest, nebbish way and recounts a conversation between two elderly women at a diner. The one says, "The food here is terrible." And the other agrees, "I know, and such small portions." His takeaway, that life is made up of a series of terrible experiences, and it's over far too quickly, so find what joy you can. You'd be forgiven for mistaking it for death. Ran into episodes of South Park and Nip Tuck, where the storylines were ripped from the headlines. Both featured teachers falling in love with their underage students. Neither were all that supportive. In Nip Tuck, Sean says, "I think little boys get crushes on their teachers, and their teachers are supposed to have boundaries." Not in this case. The former student, now exactly 18 years old plus the amount of time it took to drive to their offices, wants to alter his appearance to look older so people don't mistake him for his teacher's son. But after the surgery, she loses interest. He looks too old for her as she hooks up with another underage boy. They're all better off than what happened in the South Park episode. After Ike's kindergarten teacher falls in love with and sleeps with him, the cops pursue teacher and her lover to the top of a tall building. She throws herself over the edge in an intended suicide pact, but at the last second, Ike decides, nah, and the first step in the healing process can begin. Closing out this section on disc 999, I found a co-promotion for Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and Dollhouse, in which Eliza Dushku and Summer Glau were featured prominently in stark, high-contrast art direction and fat Rockwell serif font titles. The shows were promoted like a Quentin Tarantino Grindhouse-style double feature, and ultimately this is very exciting because it suggests that I could be running into episodes of Dollhouse pretty soon. There are 3 flowers in a vase. The middle flower is wild.
Checking out my current collection.
In my direct-to-DVD recordings, I have just barely started watching the 4th season of Fargo. I watched the season premiere, and as of this recording, I have 3 left to watch. Not gonna lie, this one opens pretty far afield. Read the show title. We've got a thumbnail history lesson on the rise and expansion of organized crime as it established itself in Kansas City, rest of peace and occasional violence among Jewish, Irish, Italian, and African-American crime families, leading up to the state of affairs we found ourselves looking at in the 1950s through the eyes of Mary Crutchfield as a young black woman named Ethelreda Pearl Smutney. Her family runs a funeral parlor. Ethelreda's bright and outspoken, which combination does not do her any favors at her 1950s school. She encounters Jessie Buckley as Orietta Mayflower, down from Minnesota, complete with an accent that reminds one, oh yeah, I tuned into the right show. I mean, Season 2 focused on rival drug-running families set some 3 decades in the future from the events of Season 4, which itself opened with some broad historical perspective. But then, like I've said, I've only watched the season premiere. For all I know, everyone moves right on up to Bemidji for the rest of the season. What do I know? I will say this, though, it's absolutely a compelling production, and instructive. The exhausting levels of racism everyone needed to carry around with them back then. In one instance, an Italian crime boss is shot in the neck by a boy with a pellet gun while stopped at a stop sign. He's lost a lot of blood. His injury is perilous. And when they drive him to a private hospital, the service is sneeringly denied to people of your background. Looking at Tommaso Ragno as Don Donatello Fada, I am looking at him and his whole family looks as white as anyone. The man comes into the hospital bleeding from the neck, and they're all, would you kindly refrain from bleeding all over our tiles? This is not for you. This is a private hospital. There's one for your kind a few towns over. Even the ethic of, oh my god, that's a dying person, I need to save him, is entirely absent. It sure does make you think. Anyhoodles, by the time this posts, FX will have aired at least 5 episodes of this show, and I, as I said, have seen 1, so my comments are limited and dated at this point. Chris Rock as Loy Cannon has already turned in an engaging, risk-taking, and exciting performance, as had Mary Crutchfield, as had Jessie Buckley. So I'm absolutely here for this. Just gotta stop writing, recording, and editing for long enough to actually enjoy some original programming. That said, I've more or less kept pace with the 11th season return of Archer, and by return, I do mean return. The past few seasons' international incident, Sterling Archer, has been trapped inside a coma, with Coma Dreams, Archer Dreamland set in jazz-aged Los Angeles, a tropical paradise in Danger Island, and outer space in Archer 1999. This season he's returned from his coma and had to adjust to a more than completely comfortable number of changes in his workplace and among his team. Yes, they're still a semi-autonomous government investigative and covert ops adjunct. Yes, months later Archer is still in recovery but going through replacement valleys like tissues, and Lana is totally married to... Holy crap, this guy is a direct link to Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. I knew I could get H. John Benjamin to 6 Feet Under by Kevin Kline's link to Lauren Ambrose, but Stephen Tobolosky, Got Rock's husband of Lana Kane, appeared in flashback episode 15, The Friday Night Slaughter of Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. No links, no worked with Bradley Whitford on Good Guys twice removed. No, direct link. Well, that's fantastic. I know I've got a few, but H. John Benjamin, and in fact Archer itself, gets me to everyone in Bob's Burgers, gets me to The Simpsons, Family Guy, home movies, and Tobolosky himself has appeared in damn near everything once. I'm showing him involved in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The unaired pilot says he'd appeared a lot more if they'd have cast him. He was in not 1 but 2 series titled The Closer, including Kira Sedgwick's Mid-Noughties production. He was in The Practice. He was in Stir Crazy, so there's a direct link to Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. He was in 227, so that's a direct link through Marla Gibbs from The Jeffersons to Trial and Error. He was in Alice. My God, that links him to everyone everyone involved in 9JKL and Brockmire. He is designing women, the elusive link through Shock Taylor from Studio 60 to Mannequin. But more to the point, Jean Smart, and now everything from Samantha Who to 24 to Legion. He was in Memento and Drew Carey's show and King of the Hill. He was in Dead Zone and Boston Legal and Heroes and Glee. He was in Peep World and Reigns and Desperate Housewives and Justified and We Bare Bears. Really, the only world I'm not finding him directly is Doctor Who, but I'm sure that's just an oversight. New season's in the works. I'm sure he'll be hopping out of the TARDIS in no time. Not shocked to discover he's white and male, so he's pretty much the definition of my standard golden thread for this project. But Stephen Tobolosky has been in so many things. He's like the number one. Everything's divisible by it. So while it's fun that he represents a direct link from damn near everything to Studio 60, the fact that I've been tracing these connections for more than a year and a half and his name has not come up before now indicates he is a tenuous connection at best. Like, there's no connection between Hellboy and Cheers just because Ron and Rhea Perlman have the same last name. Seriously, the guy was also in the 3rd season of Cake. To link things in my collection through Stephen Tobolosky is to also link them by either having been broadcast in English. It's a curiosity. It is amazing that the link exists, but I don't think I'll be relying on it for the purposes of this pursuit. Moving on, the movie Dead Still on Sci-Fi is what happens when film students hear its terms and then misuse them. Dead Still, death photography, negative space, and the concept of photography as immortality, a cursed old camera, a family legacy of death, and poorly defined gypsy curses, and this melange of creepy makeup artistry, a self-reconstructed camera. They set bells in case someone is buried alive. We got someone out here in our reality scattering photos and chanting Latin on a creepy rug with runic writing. There's no consistency in how the people out here in this reality die. There's no consistency in when. It's just horror films need to have rules. On the plus side, pretty cool seeing Ray Wise in this as a creepy master photographer, but not even he can save this mess. I encountered the IFC presentation of Stanley Kubrick's closing opus, Eyes Wide Shut, and I feel like it was trying to be a yuppie reimagination of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but it's like a moonshot that actually lands a couple fields over, and there's some dust. There's a creepy old guy trying to seduce you at a Christmas party? Well, I heard about this wacky sex club. One absolutely ridiculous fight with Nicole Kidman later, Tom Cruise is taking a cab out to the wacky sex club. He's walking around unmasked, his eyes drinking in some, I'm so sorry, but perfectly standard deviations, and he is found out and banished. Then people he knows are associated with the wacky sex club turn up dead and disappear. Don't tell anyone about our wacky sex club. Then stop asking about our wacky sex club. Then he gets together with the old guy who threw the Christmas party and he's like, come on, seriously, knock it off with the inquiries. And Tom's all like, yeah, or what? And then goes home and they're going to tell his wife about the wacky sex club. And I'm like, oh, whatever. You either never cared if she found out or not, or you were going to bring her along next time. I mean, I think these storylines with the bored husband and midlife crises show up as recurring themes, but, well, this was at least among the grandest displays I've encountered. These two would benefit more from counseling than a trapeze in their bedroom, but what do I know? One of the reasons the Grey's Anatomy episode stood out to me was I had a chance to watch the Sundance presentation of The Green Mile with this set, and gotta say, truly enjoyed it. I didn't know a lot about the story going in. I knew it dealt with death row and spirituality, and really it's one of, I think, my favorite Stephen King adaptations. Top 5, no question. Dolores Claiborne, Misery, Shawshank, Shining, and Green Mile, all contenders, with Carrie nudging her way in there once in a while. Tom Hanks' fearless Michael Clark Duncan made me believe impossible things. The sheer number of barriers across which their characters had to reach in this film and the connection they forged. It was a beautiful thing. And then, when I found the Death Row Redemption theme explored in Grey's Anatomy, it absolutely drew my attention for this installment, for sure. Other than that, long past time to wrap this up. I just want to encourage everyone able to get out and vote. Also, please mask up, wash your hands, and social distance. We all do what we can to get through this together. More of us will. And I have been seeing a lot of new activity in my downloads recently, so to any new listeners, I want to say welcome. Thanks for joining me. This is pretty much what this is. I had a bunch of VHS tapes. I burned them all to DVDs. I'm still trying to find out what's on all of them, and this is what I found so far. I feel pretty good about all the episodes in this podcast, but top 10 episodes to catch up if you're fast-tracking, I'd recommend episodes 10, 19, 20, 30, 42, 43, 50, 56, 59, and actually the last one is about my most autobiographical entry to date, so I'd absolutely recommend 68. I'll post links to those in the About section of my Facebook page and show notes. Video Fuzzy is I'm trying to keep it at least monthly blog and affiliated podcast, tracking these cataloging efforts, highlighting the best and sharing it with you. And again, thank you so much for checking in. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at videofuzzy.blogspot.com and past episodes at Apple Podcasts, Ghana, Amazon Music /Audible, and most everywhere you get your podcasts. Feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog or podcast sites via email or through my Video Fuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJ Video Fuzzy on Twitter. For Video Fuzzy, I'm Terry J. Ahman. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.